this is very, like, very specific to the United States
Right.
too. These are not global problems. These are specific ways that these systems of oppression, which are global, right? Racism is a global problem, patriarchy is a global problem. But the way that they interact and the way that they support one another in the United States is very specific to the United States because of the history of our country and the mythology that we've built up surrounding the country. Um,
Honestly, I will even say this: a lot of the way these systems of oppression operate globally has been heavily affected by
yes.
the unique way they came together in the United States, and then the U.S.'s influence on the rest of the world via globalization.
Yes.
But yeah, sorry for interjecting.
No, please interject.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know, Keem, how do we want to break this down?
It's so historically, it's historically it's kind of hard to break down because so there's no clear there's no clear beginning. Like historically, there's no clear beginning. So we can look at, especially in the U.S., we can look at like religion being a major factor in colonization.
Mhm.
However, even that is has been kind of overstated. Um, because I mean, a lot of the quote unquote they moved here for like they came to the U.S. for religious reasons. Those religious reasons were generally just a cover for we're coming to take resources and land.
Mhm.
Um, we have been like they're running out of space in Europe, and we come to take stuff. Um, which kind of points to the fact that um, it kind of points to a starting point of proto capitalism. Like not quite capitalism as it is today, but it was definitely a rush of we need things,
Yeah.
and we can't have growth if we don't have things. We need, and whether those things were land and precious minerals and to spices, it was a rush for things. Um, but like I said, it's a very difficult start because even those things have had a lot of start with oppressive systems. The loading up of prisoners, indentured servants, and slaves from Europe and packed off into the United States, like that's also the start of things. So,
Mhm.
like I said, it's hard. It's hard for a genesis because you can't point to one specific thing. But I will say, um, I don't think religion is the genesis. Religion has been the main crutch, and Christianity specifically, in our case, has been
Mhm.
has been the main crutch because a lot of people don't realize is prior to the United States, prior to the concepts of race and white supremacy as we think of it, most of the world's breakdown of differences between peoples wasn't based on skin color. Mostly, it was based on location and religion.
Mhm.
Um, you were seen to be a lesser person if you weren't a Christian, or specifically weren't a Roman Catholic, or you weren't a Protestant. That's usually how things have got to break down further and further in the bits as time went on. And as these peoples grew and expanded, that became their primary excuse to do shit, to oppress people. It's like, oh, we can treat you like garbage because you're not this religion or that
Right.
religion.
You're not saved, and therefore
Right.
you're less human.
So like that.
Right. You're wrong, and you're choosing to be wrong. So
Right. Or
that's a problem.
or you have genitalia, and
Oh my God.
God said this and that, even though, again, all bullshit.
God said that you shouldn't have genitalia?
Yeah, you should have the wrong genitalia. But I mean, even that is, like I said, this is why. I mean, even as an atheist, like people get on just like, oh, religion is the root cause of like all the problems. No, religion is just it's just a crutch, it's just a tool of oppression
Mhm.
mostly, because all the oppressive things usually come from without religion and then justified to within. Like if you want to oppress women, or you want to oppress women, or you don't want women to own property or do this and that, you can't just saying we don't want you to do this. Not gonna work. If you pull
Yeah.
a line from a book that you have told people is infallible, and you pull that line without any context, and you say, well, it says this, it's a lot easier to justify it.
Yeah. And it's a lot easier to get women on board with their own oppression
Right.
if you can find a religious justification for it.
Right. So like that's really that drive for consolidation of power, um, and to keep it's consolidation of power. There's not any other thing to it. Like the start is consolidation of power. You want to keep
Yeah.
power in the hands of these people and not everyone else.
Yep.
Um, so that's really the start. You can look at people like Cotton Mathers, um, who had a big impact on like the growth of what we would consider like racism and white supremacy early on, and Cotton Mathers was a minister. So in the early like pre-colonial like would become the United States, that's what you started. Like that's what you would see. It was consolidation of power, usually with the power gathering of riches with religion as the major crutch on which
Mhm.
you would drive it. Um, as more and more um, commerce grew, um, you needed a way to justify keeping those enslaved people where they were, um, keeping women where they were. Um, so that's when you also start to see of the kind of those specifically white Protestant men going, okay, we need to continue to grow and get more money and get more, not money because money one thing, but more like riches and power and expand. And we need to make sure to keep the things that are allowing those riches and expansion to proliferate to stay in place. And then you start to
Yeah.
see the like if they start to branch off more and more. Um, because most people will be surprised to know that we always got the feeling that the further back in time you go, the more oppressive societies were, but that wasn't the case in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Um, but oppression became more entrenched as more and more justifications began to grow to justify it. Um, and then you'll eventually get stuff like Thomas Jefferson, and the Virginia Papers, um, as ideas of oppression became more and more codified, even with the Constitution and things like that, which is I thought was a very interesting thing to even talk about in ideas of like oppression and stuff because a lot of people don't realize. For one, first of all, the Constitution, no one know like it's not. It was never meant to be a concrete document because those men
Mhm.
did not know what the fuck they were doing, and they most of them had realization that they didn't know what the fuck they were doing. They were protecting their own interests at the time,
Yeah.
but a lot of the way it was like set up and the notes around it was that these things we're setting into place are protecting our interests right now, but they need to change later because it was created during the Enlightenment. And they were all about like, oh, we're trying to get smarter and we're trying to be we're enlightened. And they had this hope that like their children would know better. But you can't have that hope if you're already entrenching the systems of oppression as we speak. You can't be going,
Yeah.
hey, you guys will figure this out, but we're gonna keep doing dumb shit. And and as things go on, you see it like branch out more and more. But with that being saying, like these things are only 200-300 years old. It's like 200-300 years old in their like current forms. Actually, some of them aren't even that old.
Mhm.
Like talk about let's talk about like the LGBTQ like stuff, right?
Yeah.
Now there were there were some anti-sodomy laws in like long ago, but that wasn't really concerned, and a lot of those anti-sodomy laws were never enforced. They just weren't enforced because a lot of the ideas of what was acceptable, quote unquote, acceptable behavior was a lot different. Like people don't want to hear that a lot of quote unquote founding fathers were fucking each other because why wouldn't they? They were a bunch of dudes hanging out together all the time, and their wives and stuff were 3 months away. Not distance wise. We ain't talking of distances. We're gonna talk about how long it takes to get there.
Yeah.
But they didn't think about it because it wasn't something you thought about. But a lot of the anti-sodomy laws that were started being enforced, you know when they started really being enforced?
I don't. I have some suspicions, but I don't know exactly.
Around the Cold War.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is when America doubled down on motherhood, specifically white
Yep.
motherhood, as being the most important virtue.
White motherhood.
White Christian
White.
motherhood to
Exactly.
fight the godless atheist communists in Russia.
Yep. And a lot of things, I would say a lot of things we just take for granted as parts of the system of oppression really intensified, really came into like concrete existence during the Cold War. Because the US was not only looking to consolidate its power around the globe and just like create a image of itself and of
Hmm.
themselves away from a this new enemy that they had, this new growing superpower in Russia, in the USSR, and communism. But they were also trying to solidify control at home because I
Yeah.
don't think people realize the like nature of what the years before the Cold War